Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for the webinar Omnichannel Retail 2016, where we have three of the top minds in retail here to weigh in on, 5 major challenges facing retail marketers as we move through 2016. Today's webinar is brought to you in partnership by Quick Pivot and Scratch Marketing and Media. So let's take a moment to introduce the brilliant panel that will be speaking today, and then we'll give you some additional logistical information before we kick the webinar into full gear. My name is Alyssa Prettyman, Creative Director for Scratch Marketing and Media, and I will be co-hosting the webinar today with my colleague Paul Mandeville, CPO for Quick Pivot. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Alyssa. Thanks so much for the introduction. We really are excited about this webinar today because it's based on the 2016 Retail Predictions Report, where we gathered insights from 10 of the top minds in retail, including the 3 panelists that we have lined up today. And that report focused on what marketers should be thinking about, what should they be looking at, what should they be investing in order to be successful in 2016 and beyond. And when we did the original report, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately in this case, the report simply couldn't hold all of the wisdom that our experts shared in their in-depth interviews. And that leads us to the webinar today, where we hope we can dive deeper into some of the critical topics that we visited for the first time in the report. And I think without further ado, it makes sense to at least introduce the panel before we get back to the topics on the report. So first up, we have Mari Corella, and Mari is the Director of E-commerce for the global beauty brand Avon. And with over a decade of experience with major retailers like The Gap, Williams-Sonoma, Sears, and Saks Fifth Avenue, Mari is a fashion and beauty e-commerce specialist who speaks and writes frequently on this topic. And as the Director of E-commerce for Avon, she's responsible for invigorating the 130-year-old brand through digital initiatives. And welcome and thank you very much, Mari. Next up is Pat Cassidy. Pat is the Head of Global Digital Brand Marketing for the international athletic and lifestyle brand New Balance. In 2015, he was named Brand Innovators 40 Under 40, and prior to New Balance, he founded international basketball publication Dime Magazine and worked with clients like the NBA, Red Bull, Converse, Nike, and Sprite, just to name a few. And last but certainly not least is Sandy Sine. Sandy is a designer, retail trend forecaster, speaker, and book author. His book, Retail Schmetail, I know Sandy won't plug it himself, so I'll do it for him. It's an amazing book and an amazing read. It examines retail icons, the agents of change, the trends, the innovations that have made us buy the things that we've bought over the years. And Sandy's been responsible for over 400 retail projects, ranging from de novo prototypes to full brand relaunches. And he also started the LinkedIn retail group Retail Speak.
Great. So before we dig into the topics today, I just want to review a few quick notes about how this webinar will work. This webinar is going to run roughly 45 minutes, and while we won't have time for Q&A during the webinar, we will accept questions through the On24 platform and ensure you have a response as quickly as possible post-webinar. In addition, all the materials for this webinar will be located within the folder widget at the bottom of your screen. In addition to the presentation, you will have access to the full 2016 Retail Predictions Report. So as you can see on this screen, we're going to be discussing 5 topics that we know retail marketers are struggling with and trying to ensure they have in check as they move through 2016. So first off, we want to know what our panel sees about 2016 that's different from years past. So how is retail, the consumer, and marketing evolving before our eyes? Then we're going to take a look at the idea of agile marketing and how marketers structure their response mechanism to meet the modern customer while still having a sense of structure. Third, we're going to either boot or bow to everybody's favorite buzzword, omnichannel. And then we're going to look at what it takes to have an accurate view of the customer, and lastly, the technology marketers need to get their jobs done. So, just a few small topics that we're going to tackle here today.
So kicking off, it probably makes sense to frame 2016. So clearly the consumer is adapting to the conveniences of technology, and we want to take a look at what our expert panel is seeing in terms of behaviors expectations, preferences, things that are unique in this particular period of time versus years past, or maybe not. Maybe 2016 is not a seminal year in and of itself, but just the continuation of a progression of convenience. But I'll toss out a few conversation starters just based on the in-depth interviews. So, Mari, why don't I start with you? So you had made a statement in the retail report that really stuck out to me where you said, and I'll quote you a little bit here, today it's laughable when I receive an email that has nothing to do with my interests. It just seems like such a fail on the retailer's part. And I don't think you're alone. The industry is sort of riddled with examples, especially on social media, where brands get mocked for doing the wrong thing or being out of touch. So what do you think that says about the modern consumer and where marketers maybe need to focus their attention right now?
Well, I'm going to take this back a couple of years when retargeting first came into play. It was incredibly creepy. It was like, hey, I just saw this item at Williams-Sonoma. Now I'm shopping on the Wall Street Journal. Why am I seeing an ad with a frying pan that I just saw? How did they know that? But now it's become expected, and it's almost a disappointment when it doesn't happen. So now this is coming into real life with beacon technology. And I think consumers are still a little bit iffy about it. They don't understand why they happen to be walking by a Sephora and they get an ad for Sephora. They don't know if it's purely coincidence or whether it has something to do with what their actions in real life triggered it. I think as this rolls out more, customers will become more familiar with it. It will be expected. And so it's really kind of taking Omni to a new level where it's gone now from just purely a web-based idea and now truly in-store and real life in the physical.
Yeah, that's great. So thanks so much for that. So Pat, I'll pick on you next. One of my favorite things from the report, and some words that really stuck out with me just because of the candor of it, is that you've said that now more than ever, the BS, quote-unquote, meter for consumers has never been higher. Maybe you can dig into that a little bit deeper. It's tricky, right? How do you talk to audiences who seemingly are looking for and relish in the flaws that might exist in brand marketing?
Sure, absolutely. I think just by nature, especially when you look at social media, as Mara said, the expectations of consumers have never been higher. They're harder to get to. They have thousands of brands, all over them every day, blasting them with stuff, their messages, their ads, all day long, every channel that they're in, on their phone, on TV, on tablets, whatever it is. So there's a lot of stuff coming at them all day, every day. So consumers have evolved, and they're continuing to evolve quickly, and they're smarter. They can sniff out advertising. They can sniff out bad advertising. And they're tougher. Their expectations are just higher. They're off the charts. They've realized that they don't have to be subject to advertising if they really don't want to be. Things like on-demand, streaming services and things like that have all but eliminated much of the clout of TV advertising and things like that. So they realize that they can mute things and cut things out of their digital existence every day if they don't want it, if they feel like they're being, advertised at too much. So I think a way to get through that is to have an actual relationship with the consumers, and I think that's on brands to do. They have to take it upon themselves to actually have that relationship with consumers who expect personalization. They have to take it upon themselves to deliver that personalization, to deliver value, and deliver service to consumers, whether that is through customer service, in digital channels, or just delivering content of value to build that actual relationship. And as much as you can, the one-on-one interaction with consumers. They have evolved to a place where they've never been before, where they completely expect to have one-on-one interactions in some way, whether it's content they like, customer service response, offers that are tailored directly to them from massive companies like they never have before, and it's on brands to follow up and take advantage of that.
Yeah, so those are great insights. I mean, clearly the consumer is empowered in a way that they haven't ever been before. So that power of one really leads to that concept of what you said, Sandy, the market of one, and it's something that you've written a lot about both on Retail Speak and even in your book. I'm curious to get your perspective. So obviously I think this is where marketing is headed, but do you think we're there? Do you think we're close? Do you think brands are sort of inching or sprinting their way there? What do you see out there?
It's a great question. I think that there's a clear lag that is existing in the retail industry right now. Certainly digital has grown and evolved far more quickly than in store. And as retailers are recognizing, the internet has become the store's new front door. And to use the phrase, is kind of the beginning of the path to purchase. Now, the problem that store-based retailing has been having is related to the kind of silos that all of these various segments have been developed, and the retailer is trying as best they can to break this down and blur the lines between online and offline. And I think that the recognition that is taking place as retailers recognize that they have to move from selling stuff to creating experiences in the store, that the next level of heavy lifting for the retailer is going to be involved in the investment that is going to be necessary to make the in-store experience as personal and dynamic as the online experience has been. And this is creating challenges and opportunities for the retailer to begin to integrate what has made online as popular and personal and overlay that into and on the in-store experience. That connectivity, that fusion that is beginning to take place is truly what will create the or fulfill the promise of the market of one, this kind of nirvana and ideal that in-store retailing must have, because if they don't, the internet wins. If it's all based on price, it's a commoditization, and store-based will continue to suffer.
Yeah, so those are some great insights, Sandy. So it's interesting. Alyssa, I'm going to kick it over to you for sort of topic number 2 now that we've killed topic number 1, but I think it sets up topic 2 really nicely, right? I'm listening to our panelists, and what I'm hearing is, distributed systems, in-store, customer has to have an experience with the brand. To me, that sort of sounds like, wow, more work, more systems, more data integration for marketers who are already sort of strained and pulling off those things from maybe existing channels. So time to get agile. Maybe that's sort of the right talking point. So back to you, Alyssa.
I think so, Paul. Here we go. Okay, so we are going to get agile. And for those of you who might not be familiar with the term, agile marketing is kind of stealing its name from the agile software development movement or period, in which software development kind of changed up its approach from a traditional project management built on sort of long, highly structured projects into sort of smaller, more iterative work cadences known as sprints. So as a result of what the modern consumer is expecting, marketers have to do the same thing now. Trends and expectations are moving so quickly that annual or even 6-month campaign structures that are really rigid by themselves can't really cut it and remain fresh and relevant. So the nature and processes that have driven marketing for years are shifting, and retail, which is sort of known for having a lot of legacy products and practices, is one of the industries that feels this impact incredibly hard. So to our panel, sort of these questions, is the campaign dead, and how are we seeing real-time relevance emerge? And I think, Pat, one or two of the quotes that I really love from the report of yours was this quote, "But that's the way we've always done it," has literally never been said. And I think it speaks volumes to the team that you've put behind you at New Balance, And then you went on to say that Agile is kind of about committing to this understanding that the truth can change. So between your mentality and the team that you built, how did you get there? Was it just in you, or did you have to build it? Would you call your team at this point Agile marketers?
Sure. So it's completely tied into what we talked about in the first topic. Any brand that says that they, or understands that they need to be consumer first and always start with the consumer, has to be agile in order to adapt and deliver value that the consumer wants. And I think that goes across the board. That goes across your mindset, the way you operate, the data that you use, your partners, your planning. And I think that not being built or have the mindset to be agile and to be able to adapt quickly is what's gotten a lot of brands in trouble. It's gotten a lot of agencies in trouble who are not recognizing or not willing to adapt with what's going on in the world with their consumers and in the industry. So when I say that, but that's the way we've always done it, has literally never been said and is not allowed to be said in my department. It's not to say we don't learn from our past wins and past mistakes, for sure. That's a big part of how we approach every day. But things that were true a couple years ago with the consumer and what they want, things that were true a year ago with the consumer and what they want, what they expect, things that were true a month ago, a week ago, are not necessarily true today. And it's hard, and you have to change your mindset to be able to adapt and build that way. So the department that we've built for global digital at New Balance, putting a lot of value on young, hungry, multidimensional, multifaceted, multi-talented people who are not cut from the same mold, who are not, who have not been stuck in or have lived in process-oriented, backgrounds in agencies or large companies where they do things one way and it's really hard for them to adapt. We approach every day being able, with the mindset that we are going to adapt with what our consumer wants from what we're hearing from technology and data and directly from them, to be swift and agile and be able to capitalize on what is true today, recognizing that what is true today is not necessarily what was true yesterday and might not even be true tomorrow. But we have to be able to approach that if we're going to win in the digital space, which New Balance is putting a big onus on. If we're going to win in the digital space, the only way to do that, the only way to not only win but to survive and grow, is to be agile and to approach every single day like that.
Excellent. And something that you said kind of reminded me of what I wanted to ask Sandy about, because Sandy, in your interview and in the report, you referenced a term that Fast Company uses, quote, generation flux. And Pat, sort of what I heard from you is you're looking for, I guess, these people, these mindsets, this mentality that's young, that's hungry, that's flexible, and that can kind of move in pace with what they see, keeping in mind, past learnings and sort of future anticipations. So is Generation Flux, Sandy, is that agile at its core?
Yes, and it kind of points the disconnect or the evolution from the kind of command and control environment that evolutionary retail has been, I should say, stuck in or has been a part of. And it's certainly fair to say that since the late 90s, as the Internet has begun to and has profoundly affected retail, the mindset of the change agents is so very different from the mindset of the traditional retail that as we go from evolutionary to revolutionary, it really requires a whole new way of approaching and taking risks, which retail has never been really good at. But it's essential now. That kind of agility is leading to what the leading retailers are referring to as channel agnosticism, where it's no longer about the channel, but it's about the brand, and it's about the customer, and the things that are all part of the new customer experience will only happen by taking risks, by making investments, by doing things that haven't necessarily been done before but are essential to create the kind of personalized experience that the customer in market of one is demanding and expecting.
Yeah. So I want to dig a little bit deeper into channel specifics in a moment, but before we get there, Mari, I just want to come back to you because you had a more specific response that I really liked because I could almost visualize it in my head when you said it. You said it's about that Agile is about having the flexibility to move in small projects and let bigger ones run for a longer term. And in my head, I almost saw, a river that's still kind of going in the same direction, but instead of just being a river, it's got all these sort of branches and offshoots that might go out and come back to it. So maybe you can talk about this two-tier approach that is both agile and somewhat traditional. Is that what you work towards or work on at Avon?
Definitely. I have a 3-month outlook, a 6-month outlook, 1-year outlook, and a 3-year outlook of where I want the site to be. And going from, the 3-year outlook is I have a larger vision for the site where I want it to be a tool for our representatives, and I want it to be engaging, and I have these kind of overarching themes that I'm going towards. However, with the speed that we're moving with e-commerce, I have to stay flexible. So I'm looking at my 1-year roadmap that I started at the beginning of the year. It's only March right now, and I've already changed it so much because I'm finding that there's new ways that we should be approaching SEO, I'm hearing feedback from the field about how they're using the site, and therefore I have to be able to adapt to that. But still, if I get caught up in the little bits, I can quickly just be distracted from the larger picture. So I need to have regular check-ins to make sure I'm still on track so that the site is progressing as it should be as a whole.
Excellent. And I think this is a really nice place to transition. And Paul, I think you're going to take us into sort of a more specific view of what are the channels retailers need to be thinking about, and how do you structure this omni-channel, Uber channel mentality that retailers need to hold. So I'll toss it over to you.
Thanks, Alyssa. Absolutely. We should dive into topic number 3, omni-channel, either dispelled or verified. I'll toss out, I know I'm not officially a panelist, but I want to toss out one set of interesting metrics on just agile project management in general, and I think I have maybe a little bit of a different perspective because I spent the majority of my career building software using agile development methodologies, and if agile principles are taking over marketing project methodologies at the same rate that agile software development principles took over software development, then in a span of about 12 to 15 years, which is when agile software projects took root, pretty much all projects are going to have some components of agile methodology and management applied to them. It was only in 2001 when agile software development principles came together, and now I was looking at some recent surveys where 90% of all software projects built on the planet, like global, right, are done through agile methodology. So certainly something to take a look at and continue on in 2016 beyond. Okay, so to omnichannel. So certainly the buzzword winner of maybe 2015, maybe 2016 too. Everybody's favorite topic maybe. But I think most importantly, it's a discussion that retailers need to wrap their head around. So what exactly is omnichannel? Is it just your channel strategy? Is it really possible to be consistent across all channels? Should you even try? Or are there some channels where you just play it safe and deliver an experience that doesn't sort of erode the brand, but if you can't get your hands on every single channel for the type of personalization that we've talked about up to this topic, what do you do? And Sandy, I'm going to come back to you. I think you had some powerful perspective in the report in the importance of connecting the stores to the larger marketing strategy, which is always a challenge. And you mentioned specifically beacons, RFID, even video and email integrating into the in-store experience. So how do you see retailers getting there, and is that sort of the beginning, end, or middle of omnichannel?
Well, it's certainly the technology has become key to making it happen and to create the kind of customer experience that will differentiate a brand. And the challenge is that a lot of the technology is new. It's being adapted inconsistently from retailer to retailer. Often some of these new technologies are being seen as ideal solutions that don't recognize the fact that it is technology and it has to be applied in a way that is holistic with what the expectation needs to be. We're seeing each one of these different technologies that you referenced applied and interfaced in different ways to the desired to solve a problem, in effect, that exists in retailing today. One of the first lowest hanging fruit for some of the retailers in recognizing the shift from offline to online and the amount of sales that is happening 10% year on year on e-commerce is this idea of buy online, pick up in store, which is pulling people into the store and giving them an opportunity not only to pick up the item that they bought online, but to get a second crack at looking at things that they might not have expected when they got into the store. The challenge that has come immediately is that many retailers have a very poor grasp of what inventory they have, and often customers were promised that something would be there, and in fact when they got there it wasn't. So one of the key database solutions is the RFID, the radio frequency identification that is being used by the leading retailers to literally a small sensor on the product that gives the retailer a better view of what they really do have, and gives a salesperson that might be walking around in the store with a tablet a true view of what they have. So this is one example of the technology enabling a positive outcome rather than a negative outcome. The problem is that each one of these new technologies have costs, have learning curves, and it is something that the retailers have to recognize they need to engage in order to keep the stores relevant. Obviously, the others, the NFC, the near-field communication devices that enable the Google Wallet and the potential cashless society, and beacons, as you mentioned, recognizing through Bluetooth, making a connection to the customer via their smartphone and connecting to their whole social platform and who they are, etc.
So that's interesting, Sandy, right? So you're basically describing, okay, supply chain meets merchandising meets marketing meets person on the sales floor, and I'm almost tempted to sort of kick it one step further, right? Which is, mobile has basically been described as the channel is in the customer's hands, and I think, Mari, I'm going to come to you next, and maybe Pat, the two of you can play off each other a bit. But Mari, at multiple points in the report, you mentioned wanting to understand, the mobile experience and how critical it was. And Pat, you echoed that sentiment when you basically emphasized that, the channel is mobile and everything else revolves around it like a hub and a spoke. And maybe the two of you can weigh in on where exactly mobile sits in your view of the landscape of omni-channel strategy, and what you think marketers should be doing and investing in. And again, Mari, we'll start with you.
Sure. Mobile will play a really big part in 2016, and we saw that towards the end of 2015, especially during holiday, about what a big driver of traffic it can be. However, it's still lacking in terms of conversion. So you're seeing customers who are coming to the mobile site probably through email, but they're not completing their purchases on mobile. A lot of them are still going to the desktop version and converting there. It's very hard to measure on two devices what's actually happening, though. So mobile is an area that retailers should be investing in. However, it's not the only piece. So I would advise against putting all your eggs in one basket, but I do think it's necessary for all retailers to look at their mobile devices and see where there's opportunities to enhance. It could be something as simple as changing your telephone field from 3 entries to just 1, or adapting quick method payments such as PayPal or Google Pay.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that you shouldn't put all your eggs in one basket. Obviously, you need to diversify, where you're putting your resources. But for us, at least, it's for New Balance, at least, we talk a lot about starting. All things start with the phone. We think about it as marketers, as we're building strategy. We've employed our agencies for a while now to think of it that way. When whether it's a campaign or an event or an execution, how does the message, how does the experience emanate from the phone first, from that tier 0 line of where our consumers and the consumers that we want in our world to be. It's where they're living. So we are investing technology, resources, understanding, again, in the agile sense of how behaviors are changing on the phone in all of our specific consumer sets, how we can best connect with our consumers where they are, the apps, the sites, whatever they're doing, where each one of those very specific consumer sets are. How do we meet them on their ground? How do we engage with them? How do we deliver value? And eventually, how do we drive them to in-store or to purchase online? We're seeing a rise, across the board and conversion through mobile. And how do we keep fueling that? If that's where we want to be, then that's how we have to think as we approach every day.
Yeah, so two great perspectives and interesting, right? Obviously, mobile shopping leaves a pretty big digital footprint behind, just in the terms of device recognition software being able to sort of scrape mobile user agent information and incorporate it into a marketing database when the customer's permissions allow. But that's actually a pretty good segue to our next topic, which is, okay, if it starts with mobile, either now or in the future, and that's a whole bunch of new data, can you see the light, as Alyssa said, right? Can you get that 360-degree view of the customer from all of these new and emerging data sources where, retail is smack dab in the middle of fast-moving customers with lots of data are making really fast decisions about how they feel about the brands, and how does marketing participate? So, Alyssa, back to you.
Thanks, Paul. And right, as you said, so the fourth topic digs into the question of at its core, data. Can you see the light of your customer in their digital footprint? And, we talked a lot about the amount of information we're getting from mobile and how important and impactful it is. But we're also standing on the verge of this major IoT sort of soon-to-be influx of even more data. So do we think that retail has an accurate view of its customer today? And is that realistic, possible, or is it even necessary? And Marie, I think I'll start with you. You had an interesting point about how hard it is to identify people with shared accounts, which immediately made me think that, my mother and husband and sister, we all share my Amazon Prime account, and probably my Netflix account. So I think this is sort of what you're saying, that the data can get messy really easily, and it's hard to identify who is actually purchasing on what. So do you think that 360-degree view is even possible?
It's never going to be fully accurate, and I know there are a number of vendors out there who have fancy algorithms that can help get closer to having accurate information. But the fact of the matter is you will never have 100% accuracy. And even with some of these algorithms, you can have two agencies who say that they have the best way of knowing who your customer is, and they come back with very drastically different demographics. So it's still important to have the human touch point with your consumer, whether that's in-store, whether that's doing regular surveys, focus groups with them, because that's going back to basics. That's really where you get a great amount of information from. However, when it comes to personalization, giving your customers digital content, you still need to rely on having a layer of sophistication and being able to target customers with the promotions and the products that they want to see.
Great. And Pat, I think you even echoed that a little bit in that you noted that there isn't a silver bullet that can give you all of your data, and that you and your team really work to draw it together and make some meaning of it in a few different ways. Can you talk a little bit about how you do that, or how you approach it, and what it takes to get the view that you get today?
It's definitely, for us, you're right, it's definitely not, there's not one silver bullet that gives us everything we need. We collect data from a lot of different sources, different providers, different platforms, different partners, all direct interaction with consumers all day long. So we have all these data points coming in all the time, and our challenge is how do we cut that up to decide what is the best data for us for specific endeavors, and then how do we use it, make it actionable. So it's not the one size fits all. Everything we do, whether it is a campaign, a launch, down to a single piece of content, everything that we do has a very specific purpose. What we want what we want this to do when it gets out into space, when it interacts with a consumer. Do we want them to take an action? Do we want them to have a feeling? What is the reaction, or what is the goal of what we're building and delivering? And that dictates how we build data around, to report on performance and to set up the next time we do it. Something that is trying to drive just overall impressions is much different than if we're putting something out there to in a campaign sense to alter or change brand sentiment or something like that, all the way down to getting someone after we've delivered value over time, then asking for something in return with a purchase. And we use different things and different mishmash of data points from different places to paint that picture, to help us learn how to get better, and how to get better tomorrow, and many times how to get better in real time, as we have things out there in the market that can be changed and optimized according to what the goals of it are and how we're interacting with consumers. So while it'd be nice to have a one-size-fits-all solution, silver bullet solution, we're not there yet. I don't think there's anything out there yet that would work for everybody. So the way we've built over time is learning, testing, and experimenting, and helping to optimize everything we do through a bunch of very good, tried and true vendors and data points and new sources of data that we're pulling all the time as well, to find out what actually has the most value for us.
And it's interesting, and I just want to follow that up quickly, because the things that you're saying make perfect sense to me for somebody who's in a company that has sort of an innovative, wind behind their sails. But I'm thinking of a lot of people who might be stuck in more legacy-minded retail environments, and it sounds like, the reality is that it is a huge amount of effort, and it is a huge way in the way that retail companies think and change and operate. Would you say that's true?
I would say that is true. I mean, yes, like wind on the sail is true for us. Like, we're in a very unique position where we are given the green light to go and experiment and test and see what works, and then relay that to the rest of our global organization to help us move forward. It is a challenge, obviously, for more traditional marketing setups. I would imagine that seem to be, reliant on, what has always worked. That it seems to be a lot of the, where brands are trying to move away from the one size fits all. This is the way we've always done it type thing. But it's a challenge that's in front of everybody to adapt and optimize.
Yeah. And Sandy, I want to turn it over to you now. You mentioned in your interview this idea of clienteling, which seemed like you spoke about it in that it's the ability to get really granular and personal based on behavior and location. And I'm wondering if you can talk about that idea and how it relates to our 360-degree view of the customer.
The retailer is left with literally no choice at this time than to make the kinds of expenditures that they will need to make in order to make that in-store experience relevant and viable. The background, obviously, is there are fewer store visits, there's shorter duration. Numbers of stores are shrinking, the footprints are shrinking. So the stores that remain have to become far more experiential for them to matter. To do this, the retailer is needing to make that connection, have the data play the stronger role in store as it does online. That happens through loyalty, rewards, the kinds of things that will motivate the customer, but more importantly, as that customer is accessing the store, they need to be recognized. They need to be, just like when you're getting online, the retailer needs to know about that customer, what they've bought, what they have in their closet, how they can create the kind of a personal experience that will yield a lifelong consumer. The retailers, with this notion that there are fewer stores, the stores are smaller, are beginning to look at not the generation of dollars per square foot, but the generation of dollar per customer. That becomes a far more useful and sustainable metric moving forward. And that all evolves or relates to a salesperson that has become a brand ambassador, that is able to utilize the information that's multi-source, it's cross-channel and data correlated in a way that makes the shopping experience truly personal and the kind of engagement that we've come to expect at an Apple store to be not an anomaly, but almost an expected kind of experience for the retail venue, the branded experience, to remain viable and to maintain that customer loyalty that is the nirvana that the retailer and the brand is aspiring to.
Absolutely, which is a tall order. And some really excellent points, Sandy, which I think is a great time to transition back over to Paul. So maybe we can talk about the tools that get us to nirvana, so to speak, as we feel the force of tech.
Yeah, so thanks, Alyssa. Yeah, so the good news, as everybody knows, is you buy the right piece of technology and it fixes all of your problems. some tongue-in-cheek there, obviously. So it is time to talk technology, though, which is a topic that's near and dear to my heart because I've been building marketing technology for the better part of 15 years. And I think as everyone has probably seen just earlier this week or maybe late last week, the new marketing technology Lumascape map came out, and I thought it was heavy last year with over 2,000 vendors, and it's amazing to see that this year it's swelled to 3,500 vendors in the marketing technology space. So wow. I think everybody is chasing the age of the customer, and the consumer is this powerful driving force, and there are countless almost now companies building technology to sort of solve the problems for the panelists involved in this discussion. The question is, what are the right platforms to invest in? What sticks? What's overrated? What has big promise and can deliver, and what has big promise that maybe you should pass on because the time's not right? So, Pat, I'll turn to you first. You had an interesting take in the report, noting that your strategy is to blend technology and people, which I think is a very mature and sort of balanced perspective. Obviously, technology companies like to deliver a lot, but there is no magic button. There is no single thing that you can do. It's always been a combination of people, process, and technology, and maybe you can expand a little bit on how you make that work at New Balance.
Mm-hmm. It ties in a lot of the stuff that we've already covered in the webinar so far. It's getting the right minds, the overall agile mindset, the breaking away from this is what we've always done type mindset, where you have people who are, it's okay to experiment, it's okay to seek new things, it's okay to seek new technology, and having the support of whether it's a manager or an organization or something to go and experiment with these new technologies if you think it's something that can help move forward if it hits in the right way. So it's a mix of that, not being afraid to try new things, being okay and not afraid to fail if something doesn't work out. But when you have that mindset, you can have that mindset on the creative side, on the brand marketing side, the storytelling side. If you don't have the partner internally in an organization on the technology side, on the development side, that's where it can fall down. You can't. It doesn't work if one side is constantly pushing to do new stuff and try to advance the agenda or the organization forward, and you don't have the buy-in from the technology development side of the business. It's pulling in opposite directions. So for any of these things that we're going to go all in on, any of these new technologies, things that we're trying, in brick and mortar stores, things that we're trying on social platforms that need some heavy lifting from the development side on the back end to help drive commerce when you deliver new consumers to a product detail page in order to purchase. If you're not working in conjunction with the talent that holds the keys to the technology side of the business, is where it can fall down. So it's been I can speak from my own experience with this over the past 2 years, and it's a building process. It's there are a lot of things that when tried and true commerce tactics online and things like that or practice in store, the things are going very well, and it's not it's a mindset of an organization to not sit back and be content with what is going on or what is currently working. The only way to grow and survive and keep building and innovating is to keep looking forward, how to get better. And so we're doing that. It's actually the theme of our brand campaign that's been going on since the summer. It's called New Balance is always in beta, because we're always trying to improve and never settling. It actually filters through to what we're trying to do in different portions of the corporation. It's not just our athletes out in the world. It's how we approach how we're improving at retail, how we're improving online, how we're improving in the social space, how we're improving how we work with our agencies and our vendors to keep pushing ahead in digital first, mobile first way that we need to evolve to deliver the most value for our consumer. So it's mostly about mindset. There's tons of amazing technology out there that's coming up every day, and new innovations, and being brave enough to go and attack some of those things, and being afraid to fail, but having the buy-in of the organization that we're in this together is a big deal.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, talk about evidence of agile principles from software directly in the way that brands are evolving, the way that they manage their business. New Balance always in beta. That's fantastic. So those are big sort of themes, big trends. Sandy, I'm going to turn to you for the other end of the spectrum, because you said something in the report that I thought was interesting, which was, how do you create this device-rich experience without replacing the human touch that has been so core to sort of retail's rise? And if you sort of take a narrow slice of maybe some of your earlier comments, do you see some specific pieces of technology, or do you see a theme for how technology can support or even be an influence for more human interactions between brands and consumers?
Yes, Paul, there's no question. And the technology obviously has to be there, but relatively invisible so that it does become as user-friendly. Because we know that consumer is starting with the phone in the whole purchase cycle, the path to purchase. And once they are walking into the store, wherever they are on the path to purchase, they have to be recognized. They have to be recognized by an intelligent, well-trained, well-paid, motivated sales professional who will be able to utilize the technology, but do it in a way that still is about the user and still facilitates what the user wants and needs, because nobody wants to be sold anything anymore. They want to be, empowered to purchase. So all of these devices, all of these technologies are there to augment the one-to-one human interaction between the customer and the user. Now that will work both for assisted as well as unassisted selling, because the consumer carrying the smartphone into the store already has the wherewithal with some of the new technology to find additional information utilizing either the proper apps or the proper Wi-Fi technology that's imported and being used by the brand to get the level of information, or to get to the next level of information that they need in order to facilitate decision-making, editing the offering. But most importantly, I really do believe that these brand venues of the future will include the brand ambassador with the whether it's a tablet, with a tablet that is ready to engage with the customer, who will be open to that kind of personalization, which can run the realm of from being able to look into their closet and see what is new on the shelf that's going to be that's going to enable them to expand what they're already buying from the brand, to understand that customers' social story, and really build on the kind of loyalty that is essential to a lifelong customer that the brand wants to build.
That's great. So, Mari, let me turn to you last. So, there were a few quotes that I liked in the Retail Predictions Report, but one in particular stuck out to me, which was, in the past, you said it was always about online being in sync with in-store, But now it feels like the opposite is true, sort of building on what Sandy just said. How does in-store need to be synced with online so that you can extend that human experience? And do you have opinions on what capabilities and technology might be critical to make that happen?
Certainly, I think Beacon is a big one that's able to make connections between what's going on in someone's digital life and the physical experience. I think wearables will move towards that as well. Wearables are really great in that they're able to capture information about the physical consumer, but can make connections between how they're shopping in store, and then if you're able to identify that consumer digital account, how they're navigating online as well. One that I want to talk about is augmented reality. I think that has a possibility to be really cool. I don't think anyone's really hit the nail on the head on how we can profit off of it, but it's really great in the sense that it can help brands brand themselves as being digitally savvy and bring freshness to the site. Some cool ways that retailers have done this. I think American Apparel had, I believe it was an app where you could use your mobile device to take images within the store, and then products would come to life. I've actually seen that come through in brochures as well, where you could hover over a physical printed catalog and see products come to life and more information about that. Again, not really sure if that will catch on, but I think it's a fun way that keeps brands relevant and keeps consumers engaged with your brand for a longer amount of time.
So that's great. That's great. So those are all amazing comments on 5 really broad, sweeping topics. Alyssa, as we sort of draw to a close here, I'm going to turn things over to you to make a few closing comments and then maybe jump back in for a few of my own.
Okay, so as we come to the end of the wonderful webinar today, we want to ask our expert panel to sort of leave the retail marketer with one piece of advice, or perhaps pull back their kimono, so to speak, and reveal one secret of their success. So just a 1 or 2 liner, something really short that maybe you could put out there for the retail marketers of 2016. And Sandy, I'll start with you.
Okay. Well, it certainly goes back to a lot of what we talked about, and that is the retailers have to feel comfortable to both try and experiment with the new technologies. Recognize that failure is a part of the process, and be comfortable at failing, even though it is just part of the ultimate process in getting to the next level and developing the kind of relationship that the customer has come to expect that is highly personal. So the investments have to be made, and there has to be the commitment to this idealized market of one objective.
Perfect. Mari.
I would say the best advice that I've seen implemented is looking at your org structure to make sure that it's in line with omni-thinking. I've seen major retailers have overhauls where they have, for example, a buyer where they used to be a buyer for online and a buyer for stores, be reorganized so that it's a single buyer for both. And I think that's a very smart approach. And I know it's a tremendous amount of effort, a lot of sensitivity around it. So for those organizations where that isn't right, at least have a designated point person to make these decisions so that there's not a lot of finger pointing or a lot of, I need to check in with so-and-so to see if that's okay, because that just causes a lot of spin and a lot of additional time that we don't have in this type of market.
Excellent. Pat?
I'm going to kind of echo what Sandy was saying, but it really comes down to it's not about you. It's not about your company. It's about the consumer, and truly putting them first. And that ties back into all of the technology and personalization subject matter that we've been talking about on this webinar. Putting yourselves in their shoes, thinking about what they want out there is much more important than whatever we as marketers are cooking up in office buildings in Boston or wherever. Really putting them first in your mindset with how you want to, how they're thinking, what they expect, and how you're going to deliver on it is the main thing to keep in mind moving forward.
Excellent.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of our webinar today, and I want to send a huge thanks to our panel, Mari Corella from Avon, Pat Cassidy from New Balance, and Sandy Stein, author of Retail Schmetail. For everyone who's tuning in, please make sure to get social with our panel and follow them on LinkedIn and Twitter. This has been a great event, and they're offering up insights, and we can show them a little bit of support in return. And thanks, everyone, for listening in.
And a reminder that if you have any questions from today's discussion, you can submit them in the On24 platform. And depending on the question, we will respond as quickly or as possible or work to answer your question in a reasonable amount of time. The webinar today is presented in partnership between Quick Pivot, delivering, as you can see, fast, powerful, and easy-to-use software for smart marketers with big ideas but small teams and tight budgets, and Scratch Marketing and Media, your marketing co-pilots, helping brands develop and grow digital brand authority. And don't forget that you can download the report and the presentation in the On24 Resources folder, in which you'll be able to read more from Mari, Pat, Sandy, and 7 other phenomenally brilliant industry influencers on what retailers can expect from 2016. Thank you so much for joining.